was just taking a little time here to show something for those who got there early, so hope you found it interesting. Mrs. Wood, should we get started?
Yes, please. Welcome to our Wednesday meeting, number 8 of our GoTo meetings.
And this topic is going to be on hardening. And this little subcategory, what is it, how to do it, how do I know when I'm done? Mr. Riga's put together the charts and I just added some to it, and I'm going to walk through it since he's driving, but he's going to jump in as he can. So first of all, some announcements. Next week is Thanksgiving week. Most of you probably know that. We're not going to have one on Wednesday, even though that's not Thanksgiving. So you have that time off. Next Tuesday, also, I'm not going to be there, and I don't know what the schedule is. Ms. Wood, is there late start on Tuesday still, or?
There is late start on Tuesday, but I am going to be up north, so there is no meetings next week at all. So enjoy your time off. However, you need to remember that round 2 is very quickly coming up on December 8th. And Mr. Bush, I'm going to take over the screen really quick because I want to show some stuff.
Do I have to stop sharing?
The Google Drive. So we're going to change
Okay, I've stopped sharing.
Okay, so I want you guys to take a look in the Cyber Patriot Google Drive underneath 2017-2018 Cyber Patriots under CPX round 1. The actual official scores are there. It says CPX Open Division round 1 scores. Okay, you can sort these scores. I put it in as a Google Sheet. You can sort them by state, by number, by anything really that you want here, okay? So I wanted to show you guys that. You can take a look at your team. It's got the image scores, it's got the Cisco networking scores, and then the cumulative scores, okay? In that drive as well, or in that folder as well, is a PDF of the vulnerabilities that were tested, okay? So you have the Windows 7 and you've got the Ubuntu 14 there. I also, just for kind of extra mantra here, is I gave us the middle school ones, very similar to what we had as well, but they just did Windows 7 and Windows 10. So I felt that you guys would be able to have that too, just as an extra aside there. So that's in that round 1 folder, okay? So if you have any questions on that, don't hesitate to ask. Tomorrow's afternoon lunchtime, the room will be closed because I've got a meeting, so I apologize for that. But Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock and Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, we will have class in the classroom if you are interested. Don't forget that you need to be looking at the Cisco modules. You've got the NetAcad stuff. You are going to have a quiz on modules 8 to 12, and your packet tracer is going to be on modules 1 through 12. Okay, so do not forget that at all. Okay. Lastly, we have, don't forget, last minute cry for cans for canned food drive, and then also if anybody wants sweatshirts, the money is due on Friday. Remember, I know it's $30, but it is going to be the same sweatshirt. We're going to keep that for the rest of our time. And then as we go during the years, you guys will be able to earn patches depending on what year you've played and what level you'll be at, okay? All right, Mr. Bush, I think that's it for me. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this back to you and
okay,
get started.
So I just want to add too, as you saw, even though I think the number of quizzes, the points on the quiz was 50, the actual amount of points towards the competition was 22, and that was actually consistent with what they said before. So anyway, the total possible score was 222 on this last one, and I suppose it'll be the similar next time. So just a few reminders before we go in. We want to get the most out of these GoTo meetings, please be an active participant, especially in the chat. But occasionally we'll ask you something to speak and use your audio if you can do that. As Ms. Wood says, classroom behavior. I was thinking to myself that maybe we should say professional behavior, because I know sometimes kids do some crazy things in the classroom. So be in mind. There is a record of your chats that we save for each of the meetings. So anyway, that's that. One last thing is, and this is something we've established for a few meetings, so you've recognized it. Pay attention as we go through. I'm gonna, solicit questions and answers, and then what I'll do is go back and I'll ask a question that I already answered. So really, if you paid attention, maybe even wrote something down, you would know what the answer is. So it's kind of a little check to make sure you're not just doing your Snapchat while you're sitting here in front of your computer, that you're actually paying attention. So anyway, on we go. Oh, and Ms. Wood, this is recording, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so if you miss something in the beginning, like Brennan, you can always listen to the recording later. Probably useful. Okay, so what are we covering today? OS hardening, operating system hardening. And we're going to cover what it is, how to do it, and how to know when I'm done. So first thing is, before I go on and actually start getting into it, I want to see what you guys know already or think you know. So I'd like to ask if anyone out there can give a definition, and not necessarily a definition, just describe what they think hardening is. I'm looking at the chat now. Okay, Brennan said making the system less vulnerable. That's a good answer. Anyone else have an idea? Protecting, Delvin? Harder to hack, yeah. Making the system more system secure, Chloe, that's good. Improving security beyond basic security, that's good too. If you think about it, it's like your front door. If it was really soft, it'd be easy to get through. If it's hard, the harder it is, it's the harder to get in. Yeah, harder shell, like that's, Andy, that's very good. Makes the OS more secure, like hardening a shell harder so water can't get through. Good. All right, so.
A good way to think about that or a good analogy would be, think of your house. You have many ways to get into the house. And if you're hardening your house, you're going through and you're locking all the doors, locking all the windows, making sure you can't get in.
Yeah, and if you're like me when I was a kid, you probably know how to get into your house right now, even if the front door is locked. And that's the idea about hardening, is that you close and make all those things tough, so you can't get through without having the key. All right, I'm going to go to the next chart now. Okay, so this is a definition from, I think, Wikipedia, but it more or less says what we've been saying about going through a process and securing a system, and making it more secure than it was before. I think that can anyone, let's see, in terms of hardening, does anyone have an example of something you might do to harden a system? And this should be fairly obvious to this team, because this is the kind of, okay, set up a firewall, good. Someone was saying turn off the root login for secure shell. Passwords. Simon says delete unused files. Turn off telnet. No guests. No X11. So these are all of the great ideas. I'll flip the chart now, and we'll see if there's other categories of things that we didn't mention. Oops. Went a little too far there. Okay. So you can see that we did mention some of these things. Talked about firewall, let's see, nobody mentioned updating patches. Can somebody say why you would want to update security patches? While you're formulating that answer, I'll answer Alex's question, which was, would all these system hardening things get us points in the competition? And the answer is not necessarily, but they're all in the category of things that you would want to look at, because they purposely make it so that the competitions don't always have the same things on them to make it more interesting and more fun. So why does, I just asked the question, why does keeping security patches updated, why is that important? Just for fun, we all like security, so might as well just run those patching systems. Okay, so Andy says newer updates are more secure than previous versions. I would say that's generally true, but the reality is that every time you bring in new patches, you can introduce new problems as well. But at least you're cleaning up the problems that you knew about before. Mrs. Wood, did I cover what Andrew said? Okay. So that's very good. I want to ask actually another general question. Does anybody out there have a cell phone? Okay, yes, most of you do. But how about, have any of you updated or patched your phone or updated the operating system? Mrs. Wood has. Abraham Lee has not. Okay, a lot of yeses. Okay. So, you know, these phones we all walk around with are little computer devices, and when you go to when you have a security hole in your phone, it's very dangerous because it can be abused to steal your information or to do all kinds of nasty things. So, all right. Let's see. There's a bunch of things here listed, and so there's the operating system hardening activities, but there's other things here too that we want to mention, even though it's not really necessarily relevant during a competition. Physical access controls. Can anyone answer what they think that means? Physical access controls. Physically defending a server. No, not physical controls like a keyboard. Although in some ways you could consider that. Limiting access to via physical hardware. Okay, so how do you limit the access? Set restrictions. We're talking about physical access now. So if I had a computer and I didn't want you to access it, what would I do? What could I do physically? Turn it off. Yeah, you could turn it off, but that's not what I'm talking about. Okay, Melina, I think Melina's hit on it. Lock it inside a room. So obviously, you know, the computers that are running Google right now, I can't just, you know, go up to Google and say, hey, you know, those are really cool servers. I'd love to check them out. Can I get in and take a look? Nobody's going to let me do that. They're preventing access to those servers physically. They're not going to let me in. I have to have a badge. I probably have to go through a guard. Have to have keys. Okay, so that's physical access controls. It's actually a very important thing because sometimes people think, oh, my computer's secure. It's got a secure password and everything like that. But if someone can just take your computer home, then they can unscrew the hard drive out of it and maybe possibly, if it's not encrypted, go get your data. Network controls, we talked about firewalls on a computer. What about a network firewall? What does that mean? Does anyone know what a network firewall is? Ms. Wood said you should know if you studied Network Academy. Okay, Abraham Lee answers a firewall for your network. Yeah, but what is in this context, what is a network firewall that is not on the computer? All right, so Andrew is answering a firewall that protects access to a network. That's all true. I'm going for Lester's talking about a DMZ. Thank you, Mr. Claudio. That's a demilitarized zone, and I'll let him talk about that after I explain what I'm going for. All right, so here's the answer, and guys, I want you to remember this because I'm going to ask it again. Okay, what I was looking for is a network firewall in this context is a separate device that is basically its whole job is to protect access to your network and be a barrier between your local network and another network that's outside of your network. So anyway, Mr. Claudio, can you explain verbally what a DMZ is?
Yeah, sure. So normally when we have internet-facing hardware and applications, what we do is we set a barrier. We call it the limit, that DMZ zone, which basically says that we're taking the systems that are internet-facing and we're putting them over in a zone that is kind of a barrier where we have not only the firewalls on the outside to the internet, but also to the inside of our internal network. So you have two sets of routers, if you will, that can limit that access. And if there's a hacker that gets into our systems and the DMZ, then that doesn't really affect our hosts that are really doing a lot of the work on our local network. So it's kind of a zone where we make sure that it's kind of our first line of defense, if you will, to our real systems that are really doing the work. So that's what a DMZ is really for.
Yeah, and so just to add to that, if you think of a walled city like a citadel or something, you think of it has not just the outer wall, but it has then maybe another wall inside. And there's a space between the outer wall and the next wall so that if somebody breaches the outside, they don't get all the way into where everything is. The last thing I'm going to... Oh,
excuse me.
Go ahead.
To elaborate on that would be, that's where you would find, typically find your web servers, for example, right? So your web servers that are going to be addressed or touched by people from the outside would actually go and be put in the DMZ, demilitarized zone, where none of the private services and servers are located, but all of your public-facing servers are. So you allow the users or outside users into the DMZ to be able to address and utilize the services you want them to utilize, and then you protect access from those to the systems on the inside by the other firewall that Mr. Claudio was referring to.
Yeah, and Mr. Claudio just posted a link to the definition that is a useful definition, so you can click on that link if you're interested. One other thing I want to ask about, and we've talked about this previously, so I'm expecting some of the maybe senior cyber patriots to answer, is what is a two-factor authentication? It's the last thing here on the bottom. Besides, I would like a definition, and I'd like also for somebody to say, you know, kind of a practical example of what that might be. Anyone remember from previously what two-factor authentication is? You can give it a quick Google if you need to. Okay, so there's a few answers coming up. One is two ways of authenticating that you're logging in, kinda. And then Andrew, it looks like you got either a Wikipedia answer or something about two-step verification. Okay, these are they're all good answers. Multiple devices. Can anyone give me an example of a two-factor authentication? Okay, well, a phone text is one, because it shows that the two factors are something you have and something you know. So if you have your phone and you're controlling that phone, and then by getting a text, you can prove that you're the person who you say you are, and then obviously a password or something else. So you have two separate things, something you have and something you know. Something that I use for two-factor authentication is something Google provides for free, so I definitely recommend it, is the Google Authenticator. And there's lots of other things out there, but that's a free one, and it works a lot with systems. So if you have banking systems or whatever else, sometimes they'll support the Google Authenticator. All right, well, we'll move on to the next chart. All right, so now here's the answer to one of the questions, is how do I harden systems? And you need to start with some standards to help you measure what you need to do. And we talked about the STIGs in the past. That's the Security Technical Implementation Guides. And there's the NIST standard, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. These are other standards too, like the PCI standard, the HIPAA standard. They're all different standards that when you're trying to harden a system, you need to prove that you meet those standards. Obviously, some standards or some systems need more security than others, so that's where picking the right standard matters. So I'm just going to click. This one's a live link, so I'll click on that. And this is just the NIST website, and you can browse here and get all kinds of different standards. The FIP standard, I think, may have been in one of the competitions, something you need to apply for security. But those are just a list of some of the standards, and lots of useful information out there. And then the standards really are there to help strike a balance between, like I said, a system that needs lots of security but makes it hard to use versus a system that is too loose. So can anyone think of or can anyone say what happens, or what you might call a system that has been hardened beyond its use? Does anyone have an idea? Nah, brick. That was kind of what I was looking for. That's right. I mean, actually, a brick is usually you made some sort of mistake, but it is possible one of the settings you change to prevent you to log in from a keyboard, for example, and then if you have no other way of getting in, then that's it. You can no longer get in ever again, unless you were doing something like taking the hard drive out, making an edit to it separately or something like that. So, and during competitions, people have done some things. And one example I'll share is somebody put a firewall on not the incoming traffic, preventing traffic from coming in, but turning on the firewall from traffic going out. So the system no longer could report to the scoring server because all network traffic that was not allowed to leave. They couldn't use Google, they couldn't use anything until they turned that firewall off again. You think about it, if like we use the walled fortress analogy, if you have windows where you can shoot arrows out the windows at the bad guys, it's kind of like saying, oh no, I'm gonna have to close those holes, so now you can't shoot any arrows out anymore. So you need to pay attention to which direction you're setting the firewalls on. Okay. Next chart. Whoops. Common hardening steps. So lots of you guys are familiar with these things. We are always working to set complex passwords. Least privileges required to do the job. That's an example where you want to be able to let someone do something, but you don't want them to give them all the controls. What's a privilege that, and this is the question for the grout, what's a privilege for you guys using your computers at school? What's the least privilege a student needs versus a system administrator or a teacher? Can anyone think of what a student might need? Okay, there's accessing the internet, but not all sites are accessible, right? They block some, so they're giving you the sites that you need to, or at least blocking just the most obvious sites that you shouldn't go to. What else? Access to programs. So being able to run programs on your desktop. Imagine if you could log in, but you couldn't run any programs. So you need to have that, right, as a minimal service. Is there something you would give a teacher that you might not give a student? Access to their grades, right? Maybe there's the grading system, you wouldn't make that generally available to the students. Trying to make this full screen, but. So that's a very standard process, is to come up with the least privileges needed to do your job. And I'll share with you that at Northrop Grumman for a while, people had laptops and they were not, so many people had problems using their laptops that they had to make them system administrators in order for them to just use their laptops. Obviously, that's kind of a bad idea because a system administrator can do a lot more than a standard user. So as time has gone by, they've changed it and made it so that users are not administrators unless they have an administrative job to do.
Another example of least privilege for a school setting might be, imagine if you were a TA and you were helping your teacher do grading exams. So she gives you privilege to be able to go in and put some to go through the exams and see all the exams, so that you could grade the exams, but then you're no longer the TA anymore. If you don't have those privileges revoked, bad things could happen.
Right. Another thing listed here is one service per server. And can anyone guess why you would do that? Because you know, computers are powerful, and if you may be able to run lots of different services on one server, why would it be a good security practice to have one service per server? This is a tough one. You could try and Google it. Abraham said no multitasking. No, that's not it. One service per server. And when we're talking about a service, Mr. Rodriguez talked about one before, you know, like having a web server. Okay, Andrew says there's no hidden services. That's not really what we're going for. Okay, we're getting closer. Leon says if something goes wrong, it'll be easier to troubleshoot. Arin's got a good one. If a server gets compromised, you can still use the other services. You're starting to get it. You don't want one system to be taken down to bring down your whole system. If somebody gets access to a system, they may be able to do something and then take down something else. That's basically the gist of it, is you want to isolate the different systems. And one example might be also another thing is we've talked about denial of service. That's where you're overwhelmed with net traffic on a certain server. So maybe a web server, someone could overwhelm the computer with network traffic and bog it down. Well, if that's where everything is running, then all your other services may get bogged down too, and you may not be able to get other things like email or whatever. So by someone just sending a bunch of network traffic to one server, they could put you out of business. So you're trying to defend your systems. I'm going to open it up to Mr. Rodriguez or Mr. Claudio to see if you want to add anything to that, any examples or.
I think that's a pretty good set of examples there. So basically, the goal is to make it so that the vulnerabilities of one service don't compromise other services.
Yep.
So you don't want your entire system to be affected by the one compromised service. So you keep them isolated from each other so that if somebody finds a vulnerability in one service, they're not able to exploit the other services and damage the other services as well.
All right, thank you. Hey, Ms. Wood, I'm going to use my thing to ask a question that I asked before, and I want you to pick on someone. Let me give you the question, and then you can pick someone to call on, someone who you think either may or may not have been paying attention. All right. What is a network firewall? What does it do as opposed to a firewall that is running on your operating system on your workstation?
All right, Isaac, let's go. Let's see what you can do, Mr. Vice President. I think I caught him sleeping. Anybody from his team want to help him out? You know, I could always ask the girls' team to help you guys out since they were a perfect score.
Oh.
I don't know, Mr. Bush. Nobody seems to know the answer. You guys scroll back in the chat.
I even said you could write it down. Did you guys miss that?
They need the question again.
Yeah, the question was, okay, I talked about what is a network firewall as opposed to the firewall that you would set on your operating system that you're using, a workstation or a desktop or something.
Nice excuse, Isaac. Look at that. Hannah and Simon are helping you out.
And okay, so I'll give another question. Where would you learn more about these things for Cyber Patriot, these network firewalls? Google's one thing, but okay. Network Academy is the right answer, Ashley. Thank you. So, and Andrew, I'll count Cisco as well because that's Cisco Network Academy. Right. If you're looking at the gosh, what's that thing called, the simulator? The packet tracer. The packet tracer, most of them have firewalls somewhere on them, and the firewall is exactly that. It's something that is there to protect your network from another network. All right. Okay, and the last question on this one is, or there's a couple other bullets here. Disable unused services. Does anyone know why you would want to disable an unused service? I know that we say we should do it, and it's a good idea, but why would you want to disable unused services? Andy says could be exploited. That's the gist of it. But if it's unused, I mean, why? You know, what's the problem? It's not being used. Yeah, well, that was a very good answer, Abraham. Someone could exploit it because you're not checking in on it and keeping it secure. Yeah, and so, and Ashley Chen, you said, if you're not using it, why would you compromise the opening? And really what Ashley's getting at is attack surface. Have any of you heard the term attack surface? I know Mr. Rodriguez has used this term before. So what's an attack surface? Okay, Chris says the stuff that can be attacked. That's true. But if you have a large attack surface or you have a small one, what is better? Smaller, yeah, small. You want a small attack surface. So basically, you shut down anything you're not using. You're taking things off. You're turning off Telnet. You're doing these things that do not need to be there because you're not using them. So turn them off. Make your attack surface smaller. Good. And we talked about making sure your software is up to date. That includes phones. But I want to ask this other query. Most of you have computers at home. Do you update those computers either through Windows Update or if you have a Mac, the Mac updates? Has anyone? Okay, good. Yes, and good. Keep up the good work. All right. Big question is, how do you know when you're done? The cold, hard truth. You never are. You guys paying attention? Brendan says when you get 100 points. That's pretty good. You know you're done for the competition. So, it's a constant process and iterative. Does anyone know what iterative means? Yeah, repeating, taking another pass at it. That is Ashley said that, and Arin by steps. Yeah, continuing to go back and checking. And that sometimes happens when we go through even a competition. You go down your list of things and then you go back, maybe back to the top, like, okay, did I think of everything along this way? You're iterating, you're continuing to check. And routine patching, we talked about that. Has anyone heard of Patch Tuesday? I'm guessing a no, since nobody's replying yes in the chat. Taco Tuesday. Okay, so Microsoft figured out that the best day to the best day of the week to issue a patch is on a Tuesday. Like, you don't want to do it on a Monday when people are just getting back to work, but you don't want to do it over the weekend when people aren't there. So they figured out a Tuesday was a good day. And I think help me, Mr. Rodriguez, is it monthly, or is it like the second Tuesday of the month, or the?
Yeah, I think it's like the second Tuesday of the month. They release all their patches, and
So
that's when you're going to see the big drops for. I don't think it's only limited to second Tuesday. Sometimes when big vulnerabilities are found, you may find faster releases than that.
Right. So, and that's for Microsoft, but all right, we just talked about.
The point of that is it's a regular event. It's not something that it's done whenever you feel like it. It's a regular, every second Tuesday, patches are released.
So you know to check on it. If they just released them every once in a while, then you might stop paying attention. But if you know, oh, today is Patch Tuesday, let's see what they got this time. So you may notice on your computers at home that you're getting these patches on Patch Tuesday. So anyway, you can tell your friends about that. Okay, whoops. Sorry, this thing is slow to update, but all right. So how about assessing your hardening effort? So Ms. Rodriguez found a couple things for us. Actually, the first one is one that I added. He had found the OpenSCAP, that's the Security Content Automation Protocol. We talked about protocols, I think, last week or the week before. But these are tools. The open part of this means it's openly available and can be used by you. We are not sure this, but I'm somewhat sure, at least for our current competitions, you may be able to use these tools to do an assessment, even during the competition. We probably need to test that out to see how it would work, but right now I'm not aware of anything that would prevent it. And so I'll click on one of these links so you can see where it goes. But this first one, the CIS Cat Lite. So Ms. Rodriguez built that image, and I'm going to bring up the image and show that to you for some of you who hadn't seen it yet. So here we go. Let me just close this. And after I show you the SysCat, I'll see if Mr. Claudio would like to help explain more about that. But let me show you this. So here is, I've got VMware up here, and I've got Mr. Rodriguez's image. And this is the one where the password is CP user 2017, in capital C and a capital P. And he installed the SysCat Lite, which is a free product, and we ran it to do an assessment of the security of the Ubuntu installation that he did. And I know some of you looked at it because I know in our morning sessions we've been doing this. But what's really neat about this, and it could be useful during a competition, is if you think they have these categories of possible vulnerabilities. So for example, like logging and auditing. And you can see, even if you are here failing 19 things, let's click on that. And you can see all these fails. I wonder what's going on here. And you can then see, well, what does this mean? Ensure system is disabled when audit logs are full. So you can look at what the remediation is. Well, they explain, first of all, why is a problem. And then they say what the remediation or the fix is. And they will suggest editing a file and adding these things. And these are ways you can check for it. So during a competition, you could use this as a way to help you build your checklist of things to check for. So this is already out there available for you on the Google Drive. We have the VM up there that you can log in and look at these things. And you can also make some changes and improve. And I know some of the Platinum teams have been doing that. You can learn more from them. I think, Ashley, you were doing a little bit of that, weren't you? And Annie was asking if this one worked for Windows. This particular one, I think, is, well, actually, I'm not sure. Is there a syscat for Windows?
There is syscat for Windows, syscat Lite for Windows.
Okay. But it's a certain version of Windows, I guess, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's Windows 10. So, but even still, I mean, if it doesn't have, it may not necessarily have all of the features exposed on a, but it'll give you some ideas. Maybe we can build an image, Windows 10 image, and see what kind of things it pulls up.
Yep. So there's some questions on the chat here. Let's see. Brennan asked if this was a complete Ubuntu image you can just practice on. Yes, it is complete. However, it wasn't. Mr. Rodriguez didn't take the effort to actually make it more vulnerable than it did come out of the box. At least I don't think so. So
right.
We didn't go that far.
That image was built in particular, to point out how vulnerable a system is when you first install it. So you've done nothing to it, you haven't done anything to harden it, and you run that tool and it shows you all of the vulnerabilities that exist on a system that has never been hardened.
And so you can even see right away what fails when you have something, and the summary at the beginning, and I'm trying to scroll to the right place on this, but there we go. The summary just gives you an idea of the areas that are the categories and the number of failures you get just the very beginning. So like I said, this could be useful just for giving you ideas when you run out of things to do for Linux. And we can see about getting something for the Windows, as Mr. Rodriguez said. Now,
I'd highly recommend anybody that's planning on working on the Linux images to go through that list at least once when they're creating their checklists, because some of the things you're going to see in there are going to be potentially common things that you'll see in the competitions. And as Mr. Bush pointed out, it does give you instructions on how to fix those things and how to identify those things. So that's a bit of information that you may not necessarily know if you haven't gone through and looked at that document.
Yeah, and the question was asked that, is there a scoring engine? And it's not exactly a scoring engine, meaning that it doesn't automatically give you points and make music and stuff as you fix things. But what you can do is rerun it and get an updated report that shows if you've improved your score. So that is the fact. And
and if you don't mind, actually,
Go ahead.
that is, aside from what we're doing in the Cyber Patriots and the scoring engine you see in the competitions, that's one way of kind of bringing some things to light. But that's actually what we would consider a scoring engine in the professional field, where you're actually taking an image and you're trying to harden it. It's going to score it for you, and it's going to tell you where your problems are, and you go through various iterations, cleaning things up and seeing what other things get exposed as you go through the process of cleaning it up.
Thank you for that. That's a great answer. All right. I'm going to close this for now. And then there's some other links here to the OpenSCAP. And there's a command line tool, a graphical workbench, continuous monitoring. And you can see Mr. Rodriguez put the Ubuntu definitions here because, as you know, we are usually doing Ubuntu on our competitions. So is there anything, Mr. Claudio, you can tell us about the origin or the background for OpenSCAP, or any other information you want to add? Did we lose him? You know, I'm looking, and I think Mr. Claudio may have had to drop off. So I will go to the next chart, though. This shows an example of an OpenSCAP vulnerability scan. And Mr. Rodriguez, do you ran this on a machine and took a little screen snapshot? And I guess
yes,
you ran the graphical workbench. Is that right?
No, that was just using the command line tools and and having it run through the image or the definitions for the Ubuntu image. Now, I wouldn't recommend necessarily going through the command line interface. You might want to focus on using the graphical tool, the workbench, which will give you very much similar responses, but it'll all be done in a graphical way.
Right. So that's just another image here, and before we go, I just want to ask one question, and Mrs. Wood, you can, if you can help pick on somebody, how do you know when you're done with hardening?
Oh, I think that's a question for everybody. Isaac, go ahead, redeem yourself.
All right, very good. Isaac was a little slow to the keyboard, but I think he knew what the answer was. All right, so Ms. Wood, is there anything else you want to add? I know it's getting close to 8 here, and probably went a little longer than we should have, but we had some great discussion.
No, I think this has been great. Thank you so much for Mr. Rodriguez putting this together, and Mr. Bush for you leading it. It's been great.
Yeah, it was fun for us too.
No problem.
And can't wait to see what you guys are playing with these tools, maybe even during a competition. I'd love to see if that really gets you some extra points, especially when you're stuck maybe at the end. All right, well, I'll stop sharing, and then I guess, no more final remarks. Maybe we'll just ask our president if she has anything. Maya, you got anything?
He's not on the call. She's at a college